and I'd like for you to just explain to people the basic things that are what's wrong with American capitalism these days.
The government is wrong with American capitalism these days. You give a group power to use aggression on others, its buddies will sure end up on top.
Michael, thanks very much for that very important and in fact profound question.
Oh, you weren't asking me? You were asking, oh no, please. Not you, Bernie. Can you just go take a private jet somewhere far, far away?
To do that question justice would take a lot more time than what we have today.
And also a lot more knowledge.
Let me just say a few things. Capitalism does a lot of things that they do it well.
So now we're not talking about American cowboy capitalism anymore. We're just talking about capitalism in principle. Okay, continue.
It creates wealth, it sparks the entrepreneurial spirit, and that's great.
Both true. Good on you, Bernie.
But on the other hand, what we have had, especially since the Reagan administration, is an unfettered, cowboy-type capitalism, which has ended up with the shrinking and decline of the middle class, a very significant increase in poverty, and the reality that the people on top, the top 1% or 2%, are making out like bandits. Top 1% earns more income than the bottom 50%. That is, to my mind, immoral. And from an economic perspective, it is not good. You have CEOs of large corporations making 400 times more than their workers. I'd like somebody to explain to me how that makes any sense.
I'd be glad to do so, Bernie. Let's start with your view of morality. You think it's the wealth inequality that's immoral. Of course, you didn't explain why that would be. Wealth inequality principally isn't what's wrong, but it's the poverty, despite how much the CEOs are making. The government has helped create a business climate that stifles emerging competition through its laundry list of health and safety regulations, licensing requirements, and work standards. That's not to say that I think a 2-year-old should be working in a coal mine, but if Jimmy down the street is a low-skilled worker and he wants to work for less than minimum wage for a few months to gain some skills, then that's completely fine to me. So with that stifled competition, it gives big business less reason to reinvest in their company, although most still do so to some degree, but not nearly as what would happen if the market were free and businesses would have to reinvest less some emerging competition does so.
Both from a moral and an economic perspective. The United States today has the highest rate of childhood poverty.
And that's false.
We are the only nation in the industrialized world that doesn't guarantee health care to all of its people.
So what does Bernie mean when he wants to guarantee healthcare? Well, he means he wants to fuck up markets. A so-called free healthcare system would drive up demand, and since price would be at an all-time low, what results is less accountability to that market, which creates bad business habits. Come on, Bernie, didn't you take econ in college when you majored in poli-sci?
When kids go to college in America, they often come out $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in debt. I think all of that is wrong, and I think as a nation, we can do a lot better than that.
And speaking of government fucking up markets, look, Bernie, I just explained why it's bad to subsidize other people's economic actions. Just look at education. The government gives out loans and grants with almost no discriminating eye. Whether it's electrical engineering or women's studies, it's all equal under the eyes of government. Do you think that could be a problem?
You look at some countries in Scandinavia and Europe, and what they have said is, sure, we want to capture the entrepreneurial spirit, but we want a strong social safety net that protects the middle class and working people. So this is what they've got. When you have a baby in Denmark or in Finland, you know what? You get paid, you get your salary, or a large part of it, to stay home with your baby so that your kid has a good start in life. Quality childcare is free because they understand it's important that kids do well, and they provide that. Their educational system is very strong. You want to go to college? Well, you know what? It's either free or almost free. They understand that workers are under a lot of stress, that you can't work 51 or 52 weeks a year. So in those countries, you have 30 or 40 days a year off with paid vacation.
So Denmark seems like an interesting case. Should we really become more like Denmark, like you say, with the free childcare and universities? Hell no, because their generous social welfare has actually hurt their economy. The reason Denmark's economy grew well was in the 50s when it had less government spending and a more free market. In the 80s, they had a financial crisis because they were too generous with those social programs. Since then, they've been slowly tightening that generosity, and they've also maintained a lower corporate tax rate and less regulation than here in the US. But, that doesn't fit into the it's all free narrative that Bernie likes so much.
So, to my mind, that's the kind of direction that we've got to move in. And we have seen some positive results over the last decades in the United States. When George Bush wanted to privatize Social Security, the senior citizens of this country said, thank you, but no thank you. We don't necessarily want to invest all of our retirement income in the stock market, as volatile as that is.
I wouldn't either. You never know who the government will bet for next.
We would like to make sure that we get a check every single month. People are proud of that. Medicare has its problems. But you know what? You ask seniors about how Medicare compares with the private insurance that they used to have, and they say, we like Medicare very, very much. Talk to veterans around this country about the Veterans Administration, and they will say they are very proud of this government-run healthcare system, which provides quality healthcare to all of them as a right of their service.
Really, Bernie? Really? That's wrong. They are actually ashamed of their system. It takes them far too long and with far too much difficulty to get help. And that's of course discounting how in a stateless society we wouldn't have the PTSD factory that is the US military.
So we have a lot that we can build on. But I think what we have got to do is end the survival of the fittest mentality, this Darwinian concept that says we all have to fight against each other, and maybe a few of us will crawl our way to the top and make billions, but we're leaving around kids who are sleeping out on the streets, kids who are hungry, families that can't afford to send their kids to college. Can we do better than that? I think we can.
I think we can too, Bernie. And this isn't because there's some survival of the fittest, unfettered capitalism going on. It's actually quite the opposite. There's an organization that is extorting and threatening businesses and people, but also giving major kickbacks to the ones of its choice. Can you guess what organization that is, Bernie? It starts with a G, and it helps officials get a $600,000 third home while simultaneously letting them rail against wealth inequality, but I doubt you'll guess what it is. Liberty out, but not gone.